Hello, good morning, good afternoon,
Hello
and good
everyone.
evening, wherever you're joining from this today. I am not in my usual Houston today. I'm actually sitting in Sedona, Arizona. So it's a little bit earlier in the morning for me. Govin, what time's for you now?
8:30 night.
All right. So, like I said, we got the globe covered at this point. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Um, just want to make sure you guys are at the right presentation. We're talking about today about Dynamics 365. Hopefully, if you're using Dynamics 365 and trying to understand how you can build a proper data architecture to leverage the power of data that you have today. So that is the presentation we're going to be going through today. Essentially, our we have taken our time to go through the options that you have if you're using Dynamics and what are your options for Fabric. We will be kind of going through in general guidance. So essentially, it's not only limited to Fabric. However, we are going to be focusing primarily on Microsoft Fabric. We'll give you a little bit of idea if you're not familiar with Microsoft Fabric, what that is, and we will kind of go from there. So to go, if you have questions, do put in the chat. We'll try to monitor it, but at the end of the session, we'll try to come back and review those as well. With that, I think just a little bit about us. We are data crafters. We are a boutique data analytics end-to-end consulting company. We are focused around creating value for our customers. We bring a lot of industry experience. And we have a global footprint, as you can tell. So we're kind of split across the globe for our dev team between North America, Europe, and Asia. So let's start with a little bit of introduction about the people you'll be hearing from today. So Govind,
Yeah, thank you, Khalid. So, hello everyone, and I'm Govind Rajan, and I work as a data architect in Data Crafters. I have close to 8 years of experience specializing in data engineering. And I initially started my career with SAP Analytics. So I worked on SAP BW, and then there was this Lumira Designer, the visualization tool, and a few stuff on SAP ECC as well, the ERP system. And after around 2 years, I moved to Azure. And for the past 6 years, I have been working in different Azure tools. And my experience with Delta Lake, Databricks helped me to quickly start on Microsoft Fabric. And in Data Crafters, for the past 1 year, I have been working on building and implementing different data architectures in Microsoft Fabric. And we have been working on D365 as well. So, we had been able to successfully connect D365 and perform analytics on that. So, this session is going to be about what we had achieved and how this particular session can help you to do analytics on top of D365. Yeah, with that, I hope you have a very valuable, insightful session today. And over to you, Khalid.
Govind is being very kind. We are running multiple D365 Fabric implementation, and as you can tell, not everything goes according to plan. And we have had our fair share of learning, and we'll try to essentially pass that on. But that was the intention behind this webinar. So, my name is Khalid Chaudhary. I'm the principal at Data Crafters. I am an accidental data professional. I was in finance about for a decade. So my officially was in finance for maybe a little over a decade, but the last part I was finance director for BI analytics. But I come from the world of Excel, and yes, a lot of data people's nightmare. Yes, I come from the world of Excel, but have gone to the dark side upstream into more on that side. Um, Again, I help most of the senior leadership trying to figure out how to make value of their data. And then I have become more technical than I would care to admit, but most of the time when things get technical, I have people like Govin who helps me out, keeps me in line. All right, so let's take a quick look at Thanks, Chewy. Yes, it is the corporate database. We're trying to get out of that. uh, so, quick look at an agenda. We'll do a introduction and what the journey of analytics for it is, and what the legacy options has been, and why you don't have an option to stay on the legacy architecture. Sorry, someone. Yes, I hate access to the core of my being. Right, it is so much easier to get someone in Azure SQL DB or something like that. Yes, please get people of access. That thing doesn't. It's very hard to connect from outside. I don't even know why Microsoft. Sorry, I will come back. Someone is making sure that I stay on track. Right, so. There are a couple of the legacy option, what it used to be, and why you can't why we can't stick with the legacy option, and what options we have today. And we'll kind of show you in technicality what it looks like as well. So first premise perspective, I just don't want to get, I just want to get that out of it. There are analytics usually built in and reporting capability that are built into ERPs. And in simplicity, most of them function as export to Excel. But I mean, that's literally all I really need to say from that perspective. But whenever we are working with ERP, even with Dynamics, we have limited capabilities, right? We cannot incorporate data from many systems. And at the end of the day, you'll have to do reporting analytics for your other system, and trying to do them in different places become very expensive. Hence, centralizing and creating analytics on top of that tends to be the most cost-effective option and realistic. So that in finance, we have a thing called reconciliation of reconciliations, because you don't know which data is right. So that is essentially kind of the premise behind it. Govind, what do you think? You used to started with SAP Analytics yourself, right? Now, I know the SAP Analytics looks great, but in reality, effectiveness and adoption, right? You, what are your thoughts on using a centralized analytics platform rather than application platform?
Yeah, I would say the SAP Analytics, when I had worked few years back, it was mature in few scenarios, but it was very hard for a business user to get onto it and then start working with that. And as you said, the data that we need to bring from multiple systems. Again, SAP would not have all the would not satisfy all the needs of a particular company. They might have some small analytical, not analytical, more of like a transactional database that they want to integrate and see that. In that perspective, it was very hard to work building analytics directly on top of SAP. And yes, I would say having an analytics platform that we are going to show would be not would be, it is a very good alternative approach to what previously we had been doing.
Yeah. So I think in the world of dynamics, right, we have multiple systems, right? That we're going to be focusing today on F&O, but obviously you have all these systems that we have built together, right? Now, you guys know what dynamics is, so we're not going to really go into that. But this is a simple concept that this is actually from Microsoft. If you think about it, we have customers on one end, products on the other side, and to wrap this together, we have our people and operations, right? That is kind of, if you think about a feedback loop perspective, and we need to continuously understand what the signal it is giving and taking action on that. So understanding signals becomes very important, and then making sure the signals in an actionable fashion becomes more critical. So as we have your realistic, hold on, let's see if it moves. Okay, there you go. So again, coming back to is these are your options in Dynamics. Question is, how do you unleash your data, right? And in unleash your data means how do you get the data in the hands of right people at the right time without doing export to Excel manually. All right. So the simple perspective, the Dynamics 365 architecture now on the cloud is supported by Dataverse, essentially meaning the SQL and the data lake that's behind it, it's completely SaaS, meaning we cannot get access to it. So essentially, like the old days of applications where we would just pull the data from the SQL server, doesn't work. So the legacy architecture for that has been, we used to use a feature called export to data lake, where the data will get pushed out into in a CSV format in an Azure data lake, and it was almost a continuous replication. And then majority of us use Synapse to pull data on top of that. Now, in reality, this is what it kind of looked like. So, I mean, this would be fine, but it looks more like this. I mean, Govind,
Yeah.
you want to give your 2 cents about this?
Okay. So as Khaled had shown the previous slide, it was a very simple architecture in paper. But if you wanted to build something on the export to data lake, you have to do it at a very I mean, using a very complex architecture like what we have shown here. And this would involve multiple pipelines. Like, if you think about export to data lake, it uh, exports the data in change feed, meaning like e- every 15 minutes, it takes whatever data that has been changed on the Dynamics 365 side, and then it exports as a CSV file to the data lake. Now you are tasked with creating a change feed pipeline that takes the latest data and then kind of like upserts to the existing data. I mean, talking about itself is a very extensive
So I
line, right?
rest my case, right? So
Yeah.
essentially, even though it worked, I mean, the challenge with the architecture is there's a lot of moving pieces, and this is, I would say, the old Microsoft. What I mean by that, Microsoft will give you the parts the Porsche, but you got to build your Porsche together. Meaning you can make it the most secure thing in the world, but out of the box, it is neither secure, not performant, and whatnot. You have to go tweak and make sure everything works correctly.
And one more thing, Khaled, here we haven't shown the file structure, right? So you would not expect a table. It would be more of like folders and multiple files within it. You would be like scratching your head where I need to create a view. That is something, so crazy about this one.
All right, sounds good. So, with that said, I think the good part is that Microsoft is deprecating this current part, which can be a bad part as well, meaning Microsoft is forcing you to upgrade your systems. But export to data lake is being deprecated effective October 31st. And their guidance has been they will be removing it from code early 2025. They have not exactly said when, but they are moving forward, which I thought was very ambitious when I heard it first, but they seem to be going pretty well from that perspective on getting the new features out and whatnot. So now, what is the path forward, right? The good part is the path forward in both scenarios are actually, you have two scenarios, right? So you still have the build your own Porsche versus kind of going the different way. So on a high level, from a dynamics perspective, in general, from a Dataverse perspective, you have two options. There's no official name for it, but we tend to call it Fabric Link and Synapse Link. So the Synapse Link is based on Azure storage. So it's very similar to the old architecture. However, it works slightly differently. And there is a SaaS version that is using Dataverse and Microsoft OneLake, meaning that essentially is Fabric dependent architecture. So in the Azure Synapse Link architecture, you do not have to use Fabric. However, if you're gonna go with the Fabric Link architecture, it is going to be more Fabric focused. Again, simpler version, right? So I think on a very high level, the Azure, the Fabric link is a no copy ETL, meaning you're not copying the data somewhere externally. Well, even though it does create a copy, but you don't have to worry about that. The second part is we're going to go a little bit more technical into this, so I'll have Govind explain that part. But high level, the data are kept, one is kept within Dataverse, the second one is the data is exported into CSVs again to the data lake. All right. You want to give a little bit of architecture difference, Govind?
Yeah, sure, Khaled. So speaking about Synapse Link first, I would say this is closely related with what you might currently have with export to data lake. One major advantage that comes with it is you can simply switch from export to data lake to Synapse Link, and then you can have the downstream architecture in a similar way. And link to Fabric, we have a much more simpler architecture, but it would require you to set up Fabric, which we would be talking more about in the upcoming slides. But apart from what difference do we have compared with export to data lake for both Synapse Link and Fabric Link? One major difference is in export to data lake, the label columns automatically come in the table. So let's say we have a product status, and usually there will be an integer, and for every integer there will be a corresponding description column, and export to data lake automatically will add that label column and you would be having it in your table. But in Synapse Link as well as Fabric Link, you do not have label columns by default, and we can add it, and there is a way in D365 export where they have separate tables where you can go and find the label columns. So that is one thing that would be different. And other, in terms of other things, so we have this derived tables concept, so where like take this dar party table. So in D365 we have a table which contains all the customer details, which is called as dar party table, and that table is actually a join of multiple tables within D365, and export to data lake directly allows you to export that particular derived table into your data lake. But when it comes to Synapse Link and Fabric Link, we don't have the option to export directly that derived tables. That particular feature is going to come in another few months. But right now, what we can do is we can build that particular derived table as a view by joining multiple tables and then creating a view on top of it. So it's not like a major limitation. It's something not like out of the box solution right now, but it is going to come. And apart from that, in export to data lake, we don't have to have the row version change tracking enabled. For Synapse Link and Fabric Link, we need to have that. So in terms of the major differences, this is what I would say. Apart from that, there are some small differences, but not something significantly different that you have to do something in your data migration process. Yeah, we can move to the next slide, Kala.
All right, so think about in the Synapse Link architecture, you can get to Fabric, and there's two design of using the Synapse Link. You can get the data into CSV into Azure Data Lake, and then you can either go to the path of if you're using an external data warehousing platform like Snowflake and Databricks, you can essentially pull the data from that. You can technically use Fabric the same way, but again, you're still depending on CSV or not leveraging the Parquet format that's advantageous in the world of Fabric, right? So if you decide to use the Fabric, you would have to run Spark pulls at your refresh intervals to make sure the data that's coming in CSV from dynamics gets converted into Parquet, and then you can shortcut that into Fabric. So let's see. So if you think about this from architecture perspective, this is essentially directly from Microsoft. If you have your Dataverse environment, the data gets pushed out into CSVs. You can run the Synapse and make a Parquet, and then essentially bring it as a shortcut to Lakehouse, and then use Power BI or whichever part you want to use.
I want to add one point here,
Go
Khaled.
ahead.
Yeah, so right now, if you think about it, it exports data as CSV. And if you are not aware with Parquet format, it is an open source format that is used for storing big data. And compared to CSV, it has a very high compression. For example, in a very recent scenario, a CSV file of like around 60 MB, we were able to compress it to just 5 or 6 MB. So you can think about the level of compression that we get, right? So that is why, in terms of storage cost, when you are exporting data in terabytes, you can convert it into Parquet. But one small disadvantage is you have to use Spark Pool to convert that. And Spark Pool meaning it is a compute power that allows you to convert CSV to Parquet. And that compute power, when it runs every 15 minutes, you can imagine the cost that is going to come in Synapse Link. Again, we are not saying it is like a bad thing. It's just that you have to be aware of the cost that is involved in Synapse Link.
And that is very key point what Govind highlighted, right? So whenever you're trying to decide this, there's two costs you're going to be always worrying about. One is the storage cost, the other one is the compute cost. So for Synapse Link, your storage cost in general is cheaper because you're in a data lake scenario, and your compute cost to convert this into Parquet is the Spark compute that is the more expensive piece of the puzzle. All right. As I was talking about earlier,
So yeah, one person has
okay,
mentioned that we can adjust the time interval for Synapse Link refresh
correct.
to save money. But we have been in Synapse office hours for the past 4 or 5 months, I would say, and everyone is more interested in keeping the data in real time. So I would say like yes, uh, saving cost by refreshing it in a different schedule will help, but most people, I believe, are interested in seeing the data as soon as possible for their purpose. So that is where we think it would have a significant cost if you are running the Spark pool continuously.
So I think we'll kind of summarize at the end. Think about the cost and design will depend on a little bit on the size of your data and the frequency that you need it and the flexibility, right? So those are the three patterns. So if you think about if you're working with Snowflake and Databricks, you are going to be more focused on the Synapse Link version, because that version gives you the data in the raw format and you have more freedom to how you use the data lake. So that is a big factor. Cost can become a big factor, which we'll highlight in a second, because one is not always cheaper than the other, right? It depends on the size of your data, right? So I think that's essentially what I would want to emphasize, and then I'll come back to it. Again, it is like the Spark cost Govind highlighted, and then it still retained its current complex architecture from a use case perspective. Now, the second option that we have now, it is Microsoft Fabric, and this is architecture which leverage takes a page like a playbook from Fabric, which by definition is a SaaS offering, software as a service, and to make sure it you have less things to manage. So if you notice in this, on the very simplistic perspective, the data doesn't leave Dataverse. So within Dataverse, Microsoft eats, and this is the key part, eats your database allocation storage and creates a Delta Parquet. there's two things to understand, right? It's against your database storage. Second part, it is in Parquet, meaning if you used to have a terabyte of worth of data, at worst case scenario, you're going to end up with 200 gigs. But in more than likely scenario, you're going to end up with less than, because it's usually between 5 to 15 order of compression when you go to um, Delta Parquet. Now, in this architecture, as you can tell, the data is stored within the Dataverse environment, and essentially in a Fabric workspace, we just create a shortcut. Now, as you can tell, there is no ETL, right? So we are not moving the data ever, right? Microsoft is doing that for you, right? It's pure SaaS, meaning it's funny enough to a point you have to keep the Fabric capacity running to create the initial link, but the entire process of updating the Parquet files happens within the Dataverse environment. You actually don't even have to have Fabric capacity active for the replication to continue. Operation cost wise, what we mean by that is you do not have to have that many people managing it, and there's not as many pieces to manage, hence making it less to operate. Now, this is going to be the biggest kicker of why you might not use Fabric Link is the storage cost. The storage cost in Fabric Link is $40 a gigabyte, not 3 cents a gigabyte versus 40. It is $40 a gigabyte, right? So it's $23 a terabyte versus a $40 a gigabyte. Now, with that said, majority of the companies will never pay for it. Is because because if you majority of the companies based on your licenses, you're not leveraging the entirety of your database storage. Hence, it will be essentially free. And that case is true probably more than 50 to 90%. I don't know the exact number, but all the customers we have worked with, nobody were close to utilizing their maximum size of the storage. But again, it depends on your organization. That is going to be your first thing to understand as an organization, whether you fall under that or not. Now, the second part that comes from that perspective is in Synapse, if you're going to go to the Fabric from that perspective, if you have a Parquet requirement, then Parquet, the Spark pull cost can offset the database storage cost, right? So again, you are trading convenience from that perspective. There's one difference right now we have in Fabric Link, which essentially the data is uh, updated every hour. It has an hour latency for it. However, by the end of the year, Microsoft essentially is taking that to parity with 15 minutes data updates on the Parquet side. Govind, any thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to highlight the differences between Synapse Link and Fabric Link, Khaled had already covered almost everything. Compared to Synapse Link, Fabric Link has lesser pieces to work with, and we will be showing how we have built our architecture. But in terms of Fabric Link, it's just kind of like you set up the link, and then you can start working with the data in Fabric, kind of like doing all the transformations and everything. Even though there is a $40 per GB cost, it shouldn't be a major factor in not working with Fabric Link, because it is included in the license cost. Uh, Based on the number of licenses that you would have in your organization, it might be already included. And with Parquet compression, you are going to get a very high compression rate compared to CSV. And you know this is more of like whatever cost that you are incurring through Spark, you will be offsetting that using Fabric Link. And just to highlight, Synapse Link is less complex compared to export to data lake, but Fabric Link is the most simplest of all. So if you think about the management perspective, meaning like how many people are actually working on setting it up and building the architecture, it would be much easier to work with Fabric Link.
As Govind's highlighting over here, if you notice, right, Fabric Link is simpler to deploy. The you have to consider the database allocation that you have and whether you're going to end up spending more money on that or not. Synapse Link, on the other hand, it's more flexible, right? Meaning, if you want to use it for Databricks, can you pull the data from Fabric Link from through Fabric to Databricks and Snowflake? Yes, you can, but you're still then paying for Fabric compute, right? So again, question is, as organization, where you are and how you're trying to leverage it becomes key. But Synapse Link from that perspective wins from a flexibility and cost of storage perspective, right? But it does have a complex architecture, more pieces to manage. Now, from a business impact perspective, this is think about how it impacts an organization and from a change perspective, right? It's not like we don't have enough changes in the world today. So from that perspective, the rough impact on the business is about the same because the data architecture has changed, meaning your data engineer, it's more from a data engineering team perspective, right? From the data engineering team perspective and the data warehouse team, like they have to go and reconfigure derived tables, and that architecture is exactly same between Synapse Link and Fabric Link. Think about the engine that pushes the data out for Fabric Link and Synapse Link to be identical. It's just how it throws it out, whether it just pushes it out in CSV and ends there, or it pushes out to CSV with Converse gives you a Parquet file within Dataverse. That's essentially the part for it. And you have to redirect your tables and views from that perspective. So if you are pure Synapse house, maybe you can do some mapping and avoid some downstream impact. But for majority of the scenarios, like you're gonna end up with impact from that perspective. Now, as we mentioned, from a cost perspective, we are gonna have to understand data storage costs versus a data lake. And when it comes to compute, essentially how you decide to use the Spark pools, that becomes key. Because if you're using Synapse versus Fabric, in both cases, you're going to be paying for compute that would be parallel. But Synapse Link has the extra portion for converting them into Parquet. I guess one thing, Govind, we didn't really talk about is probably in Synapse, you have an option of using serverless, which means you're paying by usage versus Fabric is committed pricing, meaning like it's based on capacity. It's not really not on demand.
That is true, but if we think about serverless, as we said, it is a huge cost saving because I remember for every TB of data that is being processed, there is $25, I guess. So it would be very cheap option for doing analytics. But if you think about serverless, it has its own limitations. We cannot
Sure.
create tables on top of serverless. So if I want to materialize my transformations, I cannot do it with serverless.
Sure. So this is not a presentation about Fabric. I think we can do that. We can probably spend a day doing it. But I mean, there is a reason Fabric essentially has entered the market last year and has kind of shot up to become one of the top threes, is because as a platform, it does have significant advantage. All right, let's now this is the checklist. You want to run them through, Govind?
Yeah, sure. So before we start with doing the replication, there are few things that we have to check in Dynamics 365 to make sure your system is, ready for the migration. I mean, not migration, replication. So in terms of that, if you think about the D365 environment, so they have this platform update and it is automatically released by Microsoft, just like how you get software updates for your system and Microsoft tools. You have this updates, and only if you allow the updates to be installed, your system will be kept up to date, right? So in terms of that, they have defined that it would be better to have this particular version, this PU63, and the version number or higher. The reason being, like when you are doing the initial sync meaning like when you have established a link to Fabric for the first time. So there is a lot of data that needs to be replicated, right? So when you have this particular update, it will be done in a very optimized manner such that your production system is not impacted in any manner. Imagine your system has like 200 or 300 GB of data to be replicated, right? So they have this throttling that happens in the background such that even though you add a lot of tables for replication, it will be in a throttled manner such that it doesn't have any impact on the production environment, right? So that is why it is very important to have your system up to date based on the version that we have given here, at least to this version or something higher. Okay. And the second thing would be integrating it with Power Platform environment. So in terms of this establishing Synapse link or link to Fabric, you need to have this D365 integrated with Power Platform environment for you to enable Synapse link or the Fabric link. Okay. And apart from all of this, in terms of settings that you need to enable on the Dynamics 365 side, again, if you think about it, this is where uh, we can identify how the system actually works in the background, right? So it actually captures the change data that is happening in D365, and it actually replicates it to the data lake or dataverse. And this is why we need this SQL row version change tracking, which is a setting in D365 that you need to have enabled for you to start doing the replication. And if you are going either for Azure Synapse environment or Fabric capacity, it should be in the same region as your Dataverse environment. This one is something that we cannot, I would say, have an alternative, because this is something where when you establish that particular link, the background process automatically searches for all the environments that you have, meaning the Fabric capacity or Synapse environment. And only if it finds an environment that is in the same region, it would allow you to replicate. And when I say same region, it means the geographical location. So for example, if you have your dataverse in a particular north central US, you can still go with Fabric capacity or Synapse environment in South Central US. That would work. But again, as a best practice, it is better to have all the things in the same region so that there is no latency in terms of replication. Okay, and in terms of service account, this one is more of like best practice, I would say, where you establish the link using a service account rather than someone who's having a personal account. Personal account meaning like a work account that is tied to a particular person to be used for this replication. The reason being, like, in terms of any password expiry, or if there is a chance where that person leaves the company, the link would break, and that is something we would not want, right? So that is why having it in service account, meaning the replication setup using service account, is a better way to do that. And just to answer your question, Richard, the minimum capacity that would be required is F2. You can just use F2 for starting your replication.
The key is like actually you don't need the capacity to start replicating at all because the replication happens internally. You just need to start the link. You can turn the F2 and then make it shut down if you wanted to from a cost perspective, because the replication and the processing of Parquet is a SaaS offering within the other side. So the good part is from a cost perspective, if you need the data only during the business hours, you can run your Fabric during business hours when people are making queries. Or we actually did this whole session on how to optimize cost in Fabric, run essentially like a higher capacity on during the business hours. and non-business hours run it at a minimum basic at F2, something like that.
That
All
is
right.
true, Khalid. Like we have multiple sessions that talks about the different optimizations you can have on Fabric. Yes, we will be posting the link later, and you can follow our page for that as well.
All right. So there are like what we're going to show you today, the demo is based on a fabric link architecture, and the reason we like it is because this is one place we can do whatever you want. Whatever we want doesn't mean just because we can doesn't mean we should, but what challenges we faced in the old days, if we needed something a data lake for, we would go with one architecture. If we need a warehouse from one architecture, if now then the latest term from a fanciest perspective became lakehouse, which is great. But then we still wanted to use T-SQL, we wanted to use notebooks and whatnot. The beauty of Fabric is it gives us an unified platform what in one place. So I'm gonna go through this really quick because I'm guessing if you guys don't know Fabric, we can probably do another separate session for it. But in general, Fabric is technically not something brand new. The concept of Fabric is revolutionary, not the technology that is built on. I think Fabric essentially unifies almost the entirety of Microsoft Azure data capabilities in one place. Into now, this is the revolutionary part. It is a SaaS offering covered within one data like with it's a lake-centric architecture, and what and it works well to actually it works pretty well together now, and like at the pace of innovation they're bringing, it is becoming revolutionary because of the concept and the like tight integration within the thing. Are there growing pains? It is a year old versus any of the other tools, so there are growing pains involved, but in general, so far from all our deployments, what we have found that the benefits outweigh the frustrations, and the teams have been coming together. Now, as I mentioned before, it's a complete analytics platform, right? If you have an AI use case versus machine learning use case, simple reporting use case, you want to run a paginated report and whatnot, all those have been brought in. It's SaaS. It's singular copy architecture, meaning if I have data in one place, I don't have to move it for the different case. And it makes all users together, right? Meaning the like for example, I'm finance, I like Power Query, I don't know how to write Python code. Now I built something out and Govin's doing something in Notebook. He needs to get the data before getting the data across from a data flow, not gonna work, right? Versus now we can not only use each other's work, but we can orchestrate together using a pipeline where this portion of the code gets pulled in from Python because I have a library for it, and then I'm gonna do transformations in Power Query because it's something I want to do, and then it gets served finally. And even all the data that you have built in Power BI models, you want to use it on a notebook, there's semantic link, right? Uh, AI obviously is the buzzword for today, right? It's like it has to mention it. Obviously, we do have Copilot, and we do have a session around Copilot, what you can do with it. But it is helpful for developers. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it is helpful. But again, as we progress, this architecture will evolve with you. Doesn't mean that you have to go install and implement another architecture for it. Uh, I'm gonna spend the least time on it. Power BI probably doesn't requires no introduction. And then the Power BI has now become a workload on Fabric. So there's essentially no longer Power BI Premium, which is Microsoft Fabric now. There's only few people who are allowed to renew till end of this year, but other than that, everybody would have to switch to Fabric and Power BI workload. Um, all right. So let's kind of go through the details so we can show a little bit more on the technical side. Again, this is essentially Dynamics pulling all the things together for us in Fabric. Essentially, again, one architecture that's secure, scalable, and sustainable for all users, whether it's C-suite managers or all the analyst people that put this thing together. This is a guideline architecture that we
Yeah,
are showing right now. Govind, you want to take it through and then maybe we jump to the demo?
demo. Yes. So this is more of something that we have built internally, and this is something we would say works best because we are going to show like what are all the benefits associated with that. So we start with this D365 that you are seeing on the extreme left. We use the link to Fabric to replicate the data to Dataverse, and from there we create shortcut to Fabric. We are using Lakehouse to, add those shortcuts. And this is where we are using data build tool, DBT. So DBT allows you to have a framework way of doing things. Like you can have a structured approach towards how we are doing transformations. Again, I will show it to you in a minute. And DBT allows you to, instead of writing stored procedures and orchestrating them, and instead of doing all of that, it allows you to have a structured approach towards development, and it makes your transformations as well as whatever lineage that you want to see. It makes it very easy to see that. And this particular architecture that you are seeing, the medallion one, bronze, silver, and gold, it is called medallion architecture. And we use Lakehouse for the bronze layer where we bring the raw data. We cleanse the data and keep it in the silver layer, and then the final transformations before giving it to Power BI, it will be done at the gold warehouse layer. So this is more of a guideline architecture where we use Lakehouse for the raw layer, because if you think about the lakehouse, it can store structured and unstructured data, right? So warehouse, it is completely structured and semi-structured data. You can transform and store it in structured way. But if you think about lakehouse, you can just dump all the data into lakehouse, and then you can think what you can do with that, right? So that is why the raw layer will be a lakehouse, and the transform data that is cleansed and then have it in, I mean, having it in a final version, it will be in the warehouse part. And this particular data, we can consume it in Power BI for us to show the KPIs, meaning like insights that you want to do. You can build the reports on top of it and then show it. One thing that we can think about is direct lake, where if you want to have a very real time approach, you can do that as well. So that is why in Power BI, like you can have different modes of data that will be used for the reports, right? You can have import, direct query, and direct lake. Direct lake is a um, I mean, it's a storage mode that came very recently. And if you think about it, the main advantage of moving to Fabric is you can have direct link for your Power BI reports, which means you can show the reports in near real time. That is a very good feature that I would say, compared to direct query where you have performance loss, or import mode where you cannot have real time data. Direct link is kind of like a combination of both of them that allows you to simplify your architecture when you want near real-time data.
All right.
Anything you want to
So
add?
no, I think let's go through the demo. I think
Okay.
that way, because we're coming up close to the hour, so let's kind of go through the details of it, and then we can take some questions. And obviously,
Okay.
we're probably going to come back and do a rerun of this towards the end of the year, because we are in the active quite a bit of the demonstration. And as things go GA, we'll probably come back and do this again.
Yeah. Okay. Then I will share my screen and we can start with the demo. Let me know if you are able to see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is the place where we establish the link to Fabric. And here you can see, even though it is called as Azure Synapse Link for Dataverse, it is actually linked to Fabric. And in the top, you can see all the options that are available. You would normally create this link, and for an organization, meaning like for a single D365 environment, there can be just one link associated with it. It's more of like you cannot create multiple links. So for our internal purpose, we have already created a link. and in the left hand side you can see the entity source, right? So here when you create this link, automatically the dataverse tables will also be replicated to the fabric environment. And if you want to just see the f&o dynamics f&o tables, you can sort it by entity source, and then you can see all the tables that you have already added to the replication. Okay, so to add the tables to the replication, what I would be doing is, in the top you can see this manage tables, right? If I click on that, it will open a view like that. The reason I am switching to a different tab is it takes around 30-45 seconds to come up with this particular pop-up, and again another 30 seconds to show this table list. So I have just put it here. And let's say you want to replicate inventory table, right? I'm searching for invent and I can see all the inventory tables that I have. And if there is a table that I want to replicate, what I would be doing is I will just select this and then I will click on save. Once I saved it, what will happen is uh, the table will be added to this particular list, and in the sync status you can see there is a table that is doing initial sync. Okay, it will take maybe 2 or 3 hours, and then finally after the initial sync has completed, it will show it is active. Okay, and you can see what is the count of rows that has been replicated, when it was last synchronized on. And uh, right now the fabric supports hourly replication, but they are going to have it at 15-minute interval, similar to Synapse Link or Export to Data Lake, and that particular feature will come by the end of this year. Okay, and you can see the sync status to be active, which means like the table is replicated hourly once right now, and you can get the data from here. Okay, so this is how you will be adding the tables for replication, and you would be having those tables replicated in your Dataverse environment. Okay, switching to Fabric. Okay, here if you are not if you have not used Fabric, so this is a screen, the home screen, and here I can change the. Okay, home has not come up yet. Yeah, this is the home screen where I can see all my data here, and then I can change the experience that I need to use. Okay, and if I come to a workspace, okay, this workspace is similar to Power BI workspace where I can create new items. Okay, right now I am in Power BI experience. If I click on data engineering, I can create the corresponding items that I would require for building my data engineering architecture. For example, let's say I want to use Spark Notebook, I can use this notebook. If I want to build a data pipeline, I can do that. Okay. So going back to the workspace, this dataverse that you are seeing, this is of type Lakehouse, and this particular dataverse is automatically created when you establish link to Fabric. Okay, and you can see all the tables that are present in Dataverse right now. Okay,
One thing to
so
notice as you notice Govind is going through is Govind, if you way to zoom in, you notice the first of all the tables don't have an error. That's a sign of delta, right? So it's delta Parquet format. It's one of the thing I've. It took me 3 months to figure out why my table doesn't have an error. And then one of the other thing that's also hard to see on the top left corner of that icon, there's a sign of a link, meaning this is a shortcut, right? Meaning the data is sitting in Dataverse and shortcut into the Lakehouse here.
yeah, thank you, Khalid, for that. So let me go back to this Fabric, and if you see, we have this customer group that is being replicated from D365 environment, right? So if I search for that particular table here, I would have that. Okay, and let's say I am opening this customer cust table, I can see the metadata associated with that. Okay, and this metadata meaning like what is the sync meaning, like when it was replicated and when the record was actually created in the sync, I can see all of that. So this metadata would allow you to kind of build a complex pipeline if necessary for you to just get the synchronized not synchronized, the changed data from the last time. Meaning like if you want to just take the uh, data changes that happened in the last 1 hour, you can easily do that by using this metadata. Okay, yeah, it is taking some time for the preview. Yeah, so here you can see this sync created and sync modified on. So right now we are showing demo data that normally comes with Dynamics 365. So here we have the sync created and sync modified on. This columns allows you to fetch the data changes that happened in the recent past, and you can just use this column to kind of like take the change feed that is happening. Okay, and here you can see all the columns that are coming from Dynamics 365, and this is more of like a demo data, and you would not find much of the columns filled, but this gives you a sample preview of what data that is contained within the uh, one lake that we have. And there are more metadata columns as well. So if you see this partition and then sysrow version record ID. This is more of like technical stuff, but still for someone who wants to go and check the corresponding record in Dynamics 365, they can easily do that by using this record ID and partition. It's more of like let's say you want to check some record whether it is correct in Dynamics 365. You can easily use this partition and record ID to go and filter that particular record in the Dynamics 365 and see whatever data that you had replicated matches exactly with what you have in Dynamics 365. These are all some of the metadata columns that you can use, and for every table you would be finding the same metadata columns being replicated. Okay, so let me go to the workspace where we have built the medallion architecture, and here you can see that we have different I would say storage types. We have the lakehouse, and if I scroll down, we have the warehouse. Okay, and just like how you would have seen the architecture diagram, the bronze layer, which is the raw data, we are storing it in the lakehouse, and the silver and gold, which is basically the cleansing and consumption ready data, we have it in the warehouse format. And if I go to a particular lakehouse, I would be adding a shortcut for this particular data from this particular Dataverse lakehouse that you are seeing. I would have added a shortcut just like how Khalid had previously mentioned. You can see this shortcut icon. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a shortcut on top of a shortcut, and I am having the data in my particular workspace. So here I have the workspace as sales. So let's say you are having data marts, meaning like for every department that you have in your organization, you want to have a separate workspace where you are processing that particular data. You can have it in this way, and you can create a shortcut to the centralized data replication, and you can have it in your workspace. Okay, and if you think about shortcut over a shortcut, there is no extra data cost that is associated with it, and it is real time. And whatever data that gets replicated to this original workspace where all the tables that we have seen previously, as soon as it gets updated, we would be seeing here in our sales workspace as well. Okay, so this is a very high level architecture that we are showing here, where we have created medallion architecture using this lakehouse and warehouse. Let me jump to dbt and show you what we can achieve with dbt. Okay, so without going into much details, we have something called as YAML configuration. Okay, imagine you are creating a stored procedure for doing your transformations, right? So you would not have a way to define what is the test that needs to be run in an efficient way, meaning like you would have to build your own framework on top of that stored procedure for you to run test. And then if you want a lineage of how the tables have been used, you cannot easily do that, right? That is where dbt shines, and you can define a YAML configuration. YAML configuration is more of like a format that is followed for defining how your columns should be. What is the description associated with each column? YAML is a very common format that is used for defining things more of in a declarative approach. If you want to define some things, you can do it easily using YAML, and here DBT allows you to use this YAML for creating uh, what is the test that you need to run on a particular column, what is the description associated with that particular column. You can do all of that, and here you can see this unique and not null, right? So imagine you are having this product information, right? When you are processing the data and then when you are materializing at as a table, what you would normally do is you might have a testing software separately for you to run your test, or you might manually go and check the data to see if there is any duplicate ID, right? So this is where, if you think about this product ID, we have to test unique and not null. So in this way, I can quickly check whether in my table my product ID is unique and it doesn't have any null values. Null values is again another major, not limitation, more of like something that would cause issues in your downstream applications, right? So you can just have what is the test that you need to do for each column, and then there is a command called as dbt test. Okay, when I run this, automatically all the tests will be run for all the configuration that I have put here. For every column, it will run the test and it will say whether it had passed or not. So let's say if it had failed, quickly I will know that this particular column doesn't have a unique value and there is a problem with my transformation, right? So instead of doing it in a manual way, we can automate this, and you can even get reports on top of this. Whenever there is a failure, you can easily associate a mail ID that you want to notify for your failures, right? So this is one major advantage that comes with dbt. You can just define what is the test that you need to do on each column or even at a table level, and you can quickly do it. Okay, so that is one advantage that we have seen. The second advantage is you can easily build a documentation on top of your transformations. Previously, we saw this company dimension, right? Let me show it here. So we have this company dimension, product dimension. I have customer dimension, right? So I'm defining the description. I can even do it at column level. So if I input all my description, meaning like text values here, it will automatically pop up in a documentation that I can build. And if you think about this particular documentation, you can have it at a um, centralized place in your organization, such that any user who is using a particular table, they can quickly come here and see what is the columns that are being used, what is the description that is associated with that particular table, and all of the other things that they want to see, they can see it here. Okay, and this is second advantage. The final one is, which I love very much, and it's always best to save the last one for the most important feature, right? So here I can see the lineage for my particular table. For example, let's say I have this customer dimension. Okay, the table that we previously saw. I can quickly see what are all the tables that it uses and what are all the downstream views or tables that it is consumed in. Right. So I can quickly see the lineage, and if I press a particular table, I can see what is the lineage associated with it. And right now I have filtered it only for the customer dimension. But if I want to do it at a like at an entire scale, I can do that as well. And it would be difficult to see it quickly here. But let's say this customer
I think they
dimension
get the
that I
idea,
have.
right? I think
Yeah.
this is essentially one of the feature that allows you to create traceable designs, right? So we can write really complex SQL queries, which we're not really moving away from, but
Hmm.
troubleshooting them, how dependencies work. I think this is where one of the reasons we prefer using DBT for this kind of transformation. what Wilson was talking about, like it took 43 seconds to show the data because there's 265 columns. We don't really need those that many columns. We want to show 10 or 15. That's the information we are simplifying into the silver and the gold space, right? So I think maybe we can wrap this from a DBT perspective, Govind, and like
Okay.
show like essentially like the Power BI part. I think there's not much to show because this is something like well, this is standard Power BI, right? We didn't even use a custom visual and whatnot because at the end of the day, you'll have to get the in front of the business, the data and whatnot. So this essentially is the final outcome that you can take the data through and essentially comes back to it. Maybe we can switch back to the presentation, Govind, and maybe we can take some questions from there.
Yeah, sure, Khaled.
All right, so people like talking about all the great stuff. I want to be fair and say there are issues that are dealing with right now. One of them is missing label columns, right? So essentially, we'll have to create those with statuses and views. And when you create those as a view, understand direct doesn't work, right? Because direct link requires tables and things like that. We have derived tables, meaning that what we used to call tables can be a join between multiple tables. You'll have to bring multiple tables and whatnot. Um, as you're going to be working with, as the newer your version of Dynamics is, the less you're going to have to do. But this feature of Synapse Link and Fabric Link requires row version change tracking turned on for it to do CDC. And then entities are by default not supported. There are entity util that's coming, but it's still very difficult to work with. And a lot of old entities are being deprecated, meaning you'll have to define new entities as you kind of work through. Again, in conclusion, as you kind of saw, right, Fabric Link is simpler to deploy, easy Fabric integration and whatnot. At your fingertips, the capabilities that you can leverage at a time. And Synapse Links, much more flexible. However, it comes with the headache of managing it from there. Let's maybe do a quick round of Q&A if you have any question. There was a question um, around does it support Business Central? It does. I answered that into the question, but I'll put that into the chat. It again understand the newer cloud architecture from Microsoft. All of them are Dataverse dependent. There is a step-by-step process of bringing the data from Business Central into Fabric in the same architecture. But that's why you would notice whether it is Dynamics, whether it's Business Central, all of them are Power Platform dependent. And then from there, Dataverse, and we expose the Dataverse tables. Any questions? I know we've been answering questions all along, so um, if there are no further questions, what we will do is we're offering a free consultation. If you are interested, do reach out to us. You can scan the QR code or reach out to us in the email. We'll be happy to hear what challenges you're facing, and we will be willing. We'll listen to you and then figure out if there's a way we can help, and then take it from there. Anything else, Govind?
I think that would be all. And I hope everyone had a very insightful session into what we can do with D365 and Fabric.
All right. Thank you everyone for your time. And then obviously you can follow us on LinkedIn. This is where we put most of the time push things out. So we will come back and do a rerun of this in December once we get past the October 31st deadline of deprecation and getting our customers live. And then we'll essentially come share what the experience has been and the challenges and um, all of that. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.